All right, so after traveling what feels like the entire month of June, I'm finally back home after working my third Stanley Cup final, a fantastic experience and one that I will never ever take for granted. This time it was between the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers, and there was a lot of flight time, there was a lot of time traveling, but it was the first 7-game series I ever got to capture, and it was truly an incredible experience. I'm so thankful to get these kinds of opportunities, and I really can't believe this is my third final. It feels like yesterday I was shooting my first one back in 2022, but today I wanted to sit down with you guys now that I'm finally home and go over some of my favorite frames and shots from the 2024 Stanley Cup Final. I know a lot of you guys are really curious about how I shoot, how I capture these moments, so I want to go a little bit more in depth and break down some of these shots for you guys. If you guys haven't seen, I have posted 2 different cinematic reels from games 4 and 5 showcasing my best shots, and that's where I'm going to be pulling these frames from. So I think this is going to be a 2-part series because I do intend on making 2 more of those cinematic reels for games 6 and 7. So this first video will focus on the first 2 games, and the next video, the part 2, will focus on 6 and 7, and I'm really excited for that. But there are definitely frames from the first 2 games that I want to showcase here for you guys and really go in on how I captured it. So we're going to get right to that today. Over the last year, I've definitely noticed my shooting style as a sports videographer and content creator change to the point where I'm trying to angle myself now more as a sports cinematographer because I'm taking more use and applications from the cinematography side of things into my sports videography. The main thing being is that when you're a videographer, you're kind of just capturing things as they are, as they happen in front of you, while when you're doing cinematography, and in my experience doing cinematography on other non-sport related projects, you have to be much more aware of a lot that's in the frame, from the positioning of your subject, the composition of your shot, the way the lights in the environment are playing with your subject and everything in the shot. There's a lot of intentionality. So I think in the last year, especially in this Stanley Cup final, I wanted to be really intentional on how I was framing my subjects, how I was capturing what was in front of me in a more visually appeasing way. And that's kind of why I want to break this down for you guys and showcase some of my favorite shots to show the intentionality behind them and how you can also replicate this style whenever you're out shooting sports. So the first shot I want to break down is this one of Leon Draisaitl during warm-ups of Game 5, and I absolutely love using warm-ups as an opportunity to get these kinds of hero shots. I love shooting low up towards my subject, making them look bigger and more powerful in the frame, and that's exactly what I do here. I held my camera in a really low position and made sure that I was going up towards him to make him look bigger than life, and that does a couple things in this frame, and I'm going to get into it. First of all, by shooting up towards my subject, I'm actually allowing the lights in the frame to be shown. And I've made previous videos about this, but backlighting your subject and having lights behind your subject is a really interesting way of making a frame more visually appealing. A lot of the times, if I shot this at eye level, you wouldn't get these in the image and you just kind of see the crowd background. And while that's fine and does the job as well, there is something to be said about how the lights kind of sparkle through the hockey boards and also through the diffusion filter I'm using. That adds a little bit more detail and depth to the scene. Another reason why I really like this specific frame, apart from the fact that I'm shooting low up into the lights and towards him, is that I'm using the rule of thirds to create a more interesting composition with a single subject. In this case, Leon is framed specifically on the left side of my frame where your cross points for the rule of thirds would meet, allowing me to create a lot more forward headroom in this area for him to look towards and to move into. The rule of thirds is essentially a composition rule that allows you to create a more enticing image by placing your subject within the left or the right side of the frame or as close as possible to these cross points. And in this image, I do my best to keep him on the left side of the frame as he comes in as much as possible until to a certain point he's just in the middle of the frame. But that specific frame that I'm drawing on and showing you here is one of my favorite ones because following that rule of cinematography, this image looks 10 times more interesting in my opinion versus if he was just in the middle of the frame. Overall, this is one of my more, I think, artistic looking frames from the entire final. It's definitely one that I really admire, and even though it's not the flashiest clip ever, to me, it's just showcasing my videography and my cinematography skills in a different light versus how I would have normally done it, like I said, putting him in the middle of the frame. The rule of thirds is really an easy way to take a simple video and compose it in a little bit more of an interesting way. Take this clip of Stuart Skinner, for example, another favorite of mine from the warm-ups of Game 4. In this case, he's just nodding along and having a good time. The image itself and what's going on isn't really that captivating, but by framing him again on the right side this time of my frame, I'm creating a little bit more visual intrigue. You have some headroom coming this way, and you can see more of the background here is just open dead space, just creating a more visually appeasing image. Again, he's just nodding, smiling, having a good time. It's not too visually captivating, but it becomes a little bit more appealing for the viewer seeing the composition like this. I'm also being very careful here to get away from the board stanchion. So this was also a situation where I was really tight in with a lot of people around me. I didn't have much room to move. So I didn't have a lot of space to begin with to create an appeasing image to begin with. So in this case, using the rule of thirds was a really quick and dirty way of creating a very good visual hero shot during the warm-ups. Again, one of my favorite times to do things like this. Also, I've mentioned this in the past, but showing athletes' faces and humanizing them is a really good way to add human emotion and intrigue in your videos, regardless of whether you're just shooting for social media or for a bigger project down the line. Try to get athletes' faces as much as possible. In a sport like hockey, where a goalie's face is covered at least 90% of the game, warm-ups and between whistles are great opportunities to do this. Most of the game, Stuart Skinner is in net wearing a mask. I don't really see much emotion here, but during warm-ups, he was smiling, laughing, vibing out, and it was a great opportunity just to capture a bit of that human emotion, which I think is missing from a lot of content these days, specifically sports content on social media. So whenever you can, try to get human faces into your videos. It just adds another element of emotion that is something relatable for your viewer to relate with within your video, because even though we aren't all professional hockey goalies, we can all relate to having a good time playing the sport that we love, and it just makes your videos that much more impactful in my opinion. Also, before I continue on, I completely forgot to tell you guys what I'm shooting this on, and that was one of the whole points of this video in the first place. So everything you're seeing for the most part is shot on my Sony a7S III. The last two frames and kind of any frame you see close to the players or along the boards were all shot on my Tamron 28-75 with a 10% Cinebloom filter and a Peter McKinnon 2:5 VND. The reason I use the VND is because I actually shoot this all at 12800 ISO. If you're not familiar, the a7S III has a dual gain ISO of 600 and 12800 where I get a clean image. It's just a much easier way for me to control my exposure shooting indoors, even in really well lit stadium lighting. And the Cinebloom filter specifically is a diffusion filter that I use all the time. It's a very subtle bloom and glow around the highlights of the image, which you can see in almost any single frame where there is light present. I really enjoy using this over something like a black Promise purely because it doesn't take away contrast like a black Promise does. And I've been using Moment Cinebloom filters for a long time now. This video isn't sponsored at all by any brand, but if you guys want to check out any of the gear I use and get it for yourself, feel free to check it down in the description below. All those links are all affiliate links, which means even though I'm not directly sponsored or paid by any of these brands, if you buy gear using those links, I will receive a small kickback. So if you choose to buy gear with those links, thank you in advance. I really appreciate it. This next clip of Sasha Barkov is also one of my favorites from warm-up. Just a very quick, quiet moment right before he hits the ice. He's dialed in, he's looking serious. You can see the intensity in his eyes, which is why I really like this clip. And you can actually see what the Cinebloom filter does really well here. You have the lights positioned to the left of him, and you can see a very subtle glow coming off the lights, which you normally wouldn't get without a diffusion filter, which is why I really like it. And you can even see a very slim diffusion, very subtle, popping off his visor, which I think adds a lot to the image. Even off his helmet here, a lot of the hot spots, a lot of the highlights are really helped by the diffusion filter, which is why I use it a lot in the first place. Especially with hockey, you have a lot of reflective surfaces. You have their visor, their helmets, even their sticks at times, and the filter just kind of adds that little pop of intrigue in the video using light and highlights, which is why I really enjoy using it for a sport like hockey. Now, this is an example of an extreme close-up, and you might be wondering how I specifically got this. This was still shot with the Tamron 28-75, but there's no way I could physically get this close to an athlete, even at my max focal length of 75. So what I ended up doing was turning on my camera's APS-C mode, which gave me 1.5 times crop into the image. So my 75 max focal length effectively turned into 112, allowing me to get even closer to my subject without physically having to move in closer. And then also what I did to make this look even more zoomed in or more tighter to my subject was in post, cropping in a little bit more. This was shot in 4K, so I'm able to crop into my image a lot more without losing resolution. So just by using the tools available available to me within my camera and also in my post-production process, I'm able to simulate an extreme close-up, even though in reality I wasn't that close to my subject. So don't be afraid to play around with things like APS-C mode or cropping, more in post if you're shooting a higher resolutions, to change the way your image looks to get more appeasing looking images and more interesting looking compositions in this same style. Now, the next clip doesn't really need an explanation as to why it's one of my favorites. As you can tell, it's the moment where Connor McDavid did Connor McDavid things in Game 5 and walked through the Florida Panthers like a hot knife through butter for one of the best plays I've ever seen in person and one of the best highlights I've ever captured on my camera. Apart from the highlight itself, the reason I wanted to talk about this clip specifically is because I changed my positioning significantly to get this highlight. Now, as you can tell, there's no specific composition that makes this special. There's no specific, lighting technique behind the athlete that makes this look good, but it's changing the position that allowed me not just to get the shot, but get a unique looking version of the shot. I feel like a lot of people have this mindset of you need to be right along the boards at a hockey game or right on the baseline during a basketball game to get good highlights, and they get discouraged when they have to shoot it from a further out angle. But I'm going to tell you guys right now, sometimes the best ways you can change up your footage and the style of content you're creating is by changing your position in the venue that you're in. Here, I have a bird's eye position. I am like at the 300 level of Amaranth Bank Arena. I'm in the nosebleeds with my camera, and if I wasn't up there, I probably don't capture this as well as I did if I was in the 100s or even along the boards. I'm able to capture this highlight in this moment as a whole. You can see the play develop, and I'm able to get exactly what happened all in one frame. I have a lot of colleagues who captured this in amazing ways in different positions all across the arena, but I'm really happy with the fact that with this play, you can see the entire moment develop. You can see the moment Connor decides to cut in, makes his moves on the defense, and you can even see Corey Perry sneaking on the side, getting ready for the pass. So for me, it's just a really good showcase of changing your positioning and being open to new and particular positions in arena to get different angles of a shot. I think we see so much of the rink side or court side shots that when someone uses a high angle like this, which is getting very popular on social media now as well, you're able to appreciate a play like this and a moment like this a lot more when you're able to see more context to the situation in one single frame. The next clip I want to highlight is just this one of Leon Draisaitl taking a draw, and at first glance doesn't look like anything special. It's a face-off, it's a nothing play. You can shoot 100 of these a game and it's not really going to look any different. However, I do want to stress the importance of not just going for the highlight reel plays when you're shooting, but also making sure you're getting B-roll of moments between whistles, between major highlights, in order to have more to work with when you're editing. In this case, this moment of B-roll here of him just taking a deep breath, looking up before a face-off, was something I used in my edit for the NHL to build up tension and suspense before continuing on with the bigger moments of the game. No matter what kind of edit or video you're making, having these moments of B-roll are really good ways of slowing things down or giving context to the situation. Even something as simple as him looking up and taking a deep breath makes you realize the pressure that these athletes are under to perform and to create in the biggest moments. It's such a simple situation, but I love this clip because it emphasizes a lot of the expectations and the weight that comes with playing in the Stanley Cup Final. To a lot of people, it's a simple face-off play, but to me, it's a very important part of storytelling. So make sure you're taking the time to get those little moments between whistles to allow you to build a more suspenseful, intense story in order to keep your viewers more engaged. The last clip I want to highlight is the pregame walkout for the Edmonton Oilers. A lot of people were complimenting and really enjoying this specific shot when I posted it on social media earlier last week. And there's a lot of factors to what makes this shot really interesting. There's obviously the lights, the slow, epic movement at 60 frames per second, the way they're kind of marching onto the ice. It's a very epic looking shot. There is a little bit of intentionality here that I want to get into though, and that's specifically with how I framed the subject. In this case, I'm not using the rule of thirds, but instead I'm using leading lines to guide your eye towards the players walking in. In this specific clip, you can actually see the lights that form a little runway with the hall that they have to walk down. And it's a very subtle thing, but those lines that the lights and the hallway built allow your eyes to go directly to the subject here, which at the start is Stuart Skinner and the rest of the Oilers walking onto the ice. Now, I love getting pregame shots like this, and they're very hard to mess up when a team has a very cool lighting setup for their hallway, like the Oilers do here with the orange pulsating lights. But just taking that extra bit of time to see what your environment looks like, how you can compose your image in a more interesting way will result in you getting much better shots down the line. When I started off, I would have never thought of it that way. I would have just positioned my frame, center frame, and tried to get them walking down. In this case, seeing the leading lines allowed me to get a much more interesting image and something that guides the viewer's eyes intentionally to where I want them to be, which is again kind of in the mindset of being more of a cinematographer moving forward with my work versus just seeing it from a videography perspective, just capturing everything in front of me. I want to be intentional in these moments. I want to be intentional with how I capture this, and I think it ended up resulting in a much better looking frame for the opening walkouts than I would have gone otherwise. Across all the frames I just showed, I do just want to express that you're going to learn a lot of these things as you grow in this process. I think I said it earlier, but at the start of my visual creative journey, I would have never thought to frame things up like this or to shoot in this particular manner, but I've also gotten the experience to shoot a lot of other things that aren't sports. So for me, it's just interesting to see how much growth I've had in the last few years, in the last kind of 6 to 8 months specifically, with how my cinematography and my video capturing style has changed, especially now that I'm getting to work in other narrative and short film environments and not just live events. And I'm going to urge you guys to not be afraid to experiment when you're out shooting sports, whether it's changing up your angles, changing up your positioning on the court, or just looking for different ways to spice up your shots. Don't be afraid to get creative and experiment from what you're used to. I feel like a lot of the times as sports creatives, we get stuck getting the same shot over and over and over again. So just to avoid that, don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone and try to capture things that you may be capturing frequently in a new or unique way to change it up here and there. And that does it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this style of video. I've always wanted to do kind of video breakdowns on how I shot things and my mentality while doing it. And I really hope that you guys got some value out of this. If you guys have any suggestions for what you might want in a future version of this, like I said, I will be making a part 2 for games 6 and 7 at some point, but let me know down in the comments below what you guys would want to see in that, what other details or information you guys want to know about my mentality while shooting these events and getting these images and these frames, as I really do want to provide value to you guys with videos like this. If you guys watched all the way to this point in the video, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this, if you guys took anything away from it, learned something new, make sure to leave me a like down below and also subscribe, as I would really appreciate it. And that does it for me in this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take it easy, guys.